Hi everybody. We're starting a brand new module now for exam 3, and welcome to the remote learning section of the course. This section is a continuation of social behavior that we started talking about last time, and what I've done here with this lecture is I've combined lectures 14 and 15, which the communication lecture we were supposed to have last time, and then we were going to start with language. I've now condensed both of those into one slideshow, and I'll probably record it in bits. But this has to do with communication and language in non-human primates, and what's the difference between communication and language, and how do we study these kinds of things. So first we're going to talk about communication, and then I'll talk about language after. So communication is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. And we usually think about symbols being, either written symbols or words, but it doesn't have to be that. We have to keep that in mind when we're thinking about non-human animals. And the main point of communication is being able to operate on and change another's behavior so that you can have effective transmission of ideas within a group. So just like this child's package here, this child's package is basically a form of communication, and it has two functions, and this is similar to the way that communication in animals is. The first function is manipulation of the receiver. So in this case, the advertiser is hoping to manipulate someone, being the consumer or the child, to whine to their parents to get them to have the behavior of of buying this product. Same thing with this. They're hoping to manipulate the receiver into buying the cigarettes. And also, another form of important communication in animals is advertisement. So just like these products are advertised, animals need to advertise certain things about themselves as well. So one important thing to advertise is your status in the community. And this mandrill here is advertising something, and he's also trying to manipulate the receiver. So this sender here, showing off these giant canine teeth, actually benefits himself by preventing someone or another individual from harassing him or getting in his territory or taking something of his. And so he benefits by keeping his resources. The receiver of this information, like, oh gosh, I better stay back, also gets a benefit because they potentially, don't get injured. So there's a benefit to both the sender and the receiver for these kinds of things. And they're both advantageous. They're both adaptive to be able to read this kind of signal. Now this signal here of this very colorful mandrill on his face and buttocks is communicating something to someone else. So if you think about who is he communicating to, the first group that he's communicating to are the females. And the question is, what is this saying to the females? Well, I think it's saying to them, hey, I am a very attractive mate for you. It can also communicate to a rival that I'm strong, I'm healthy, and you should stay away from me. So we call these signals honest signals because they indicate something real about this animal's fitness. In order to get those bright colors, that mandrill on the previous slide would have to be able to be a smart guy and be able to forage and find all the nutrients that he needs to maintain those colorful patterns. So it also communicates to the females that, hey, look, I have a lot of skills. I can obtain the right nutrition. My immune system is good. My health is good. And so we call this honest or reliable signaling, because the males would like to get a mating with the female, and they have an obvious motivation to bluff or deceive that he's more fit than he actually is. So this is a good way of females actually assessing the health of this guy. Now, what we can also see is when typically males of a species evolve a specific communication trait that gets sort of extreme. So, like an extreme body ornamentation or behavior that the females really are into. They really like this signaling. And they tend to only mate with the top males who display this signal the best. So top males will get matings, and the subordinate males who don't express this extreme body ornamentation, like the colored rump of that mandrill, would not get very many matings. Therefore, their genes wouldn't be passed on very well. What we get, and why we call this runaway selection, is that in the next generation, the male has even more of an exaggerated characteristics. And the female offspring are even more likely to have a preference for that kind of trait, like the bright colored rump. So we have this sort of one-upping where the color gets, or the trait gets bigger and better, and then the males get an exaggerated form, and the females then would become more choosy as time goes on. So it's kind of like a runaway, selection for this, whatever this ornamentation is. Now, it doesn't have to be, up here I have also a behavior. So things like mating rituals or loud calls can also be considered an extreme form that's sexually chosen. That's can also lead to runaway selection. So over time, what we get when the females are choosing this way is what we call sometimes extreme sexual dimorphism. So dimorphism means that the sexes have two shapes. So we'll see the females being drab and the males being having the bright coloration. Or we'll see something like this size sexual dimorphism, where females are much, much smaller because they're choosing a male that's bigger. And then over time, we see this extreme size differential, like the male silverback gorilla shown here. So this is sexual dimorphism in gorillas, and you may wonder whether or not humans exhibit sexual dimorphism, and we do to some extent. The males are clearly larger on average, but not as extreme as this one. So we often don't think about all the different body parts that are used in communication, but animals communicate quite a lot with their different body parts. Things like the eyes can have a lot of communication. We're going to see some examples of this. Position of the mouth, the way the ears are held or flashed, and raising of the hair, called piloerection. Raising of the hair can be an indication. You've probably seen this in your dog, where they raise their hair up to give a warning to another dog, but that can also be a type of communication. Position of a tail in primates that have tails, they can hold them different ways that can convey some kind of a meaning. And then just like human, your overall body posture, how you sit, how open you are, can all be indicated by your body posture, how relaxed you are, etc. And then different kinds of hand gestures and facial gestures also play a part in communication for many species of primates, including humans. So we've tried to understand what some of the different facial gestures and facial communication are with the eyes and the teeth. And it's not that easy to do, because you can't ask a monkey, what are they thinking or feeling. But some of the things that you can do is you can simulate some kind of a scenario, or you can show an animal photos of different kinds of postural faces or gestures, facial gestures, and then you can look at what their brain is actually doing, which parts of their brain are responding to these different kinds of communications. And you would see a different kind of brain response to these different kinds of facial gestures, which suggests that they have some kind of a meaning that is understandable, and that they're communicating something. We've also tried to study chimpanzees, our closest relatives, and look at some of their facial gestures. Now, they can move their facial muscles in many similar ways that people can. We have to be careful with interpretation, though, because sometimes their faces don't look like what we think they should look like. So there's been some misinterpretation, but people have been trying to look at the faces of chimpanzees in context to see what they're doing and to try and figure out what their faces mean. And so here's some ones that we know. It's this sort of slow and painstaking way of figuring out what these animals are doing, but we can see this kind of soft face, eyebrows raised when they're interested, and this sort of softened eye face, and sort of a grin here when they're being playful, excited, and frightened. See, we might tend to confuse this face for a smile, but the eyes are different, and there's a difference in the mouth too, so they can clearly understand the difference within the species. Now, the eyes are very special, and we're sort of hardwired to pay a lot of attention to eyes. And the thought here was that humans evolved this special adaptation, the whites of our eyes called the sclera. And the hypothesis is that this allowed better communication to our ancestors in the forest, where it was dark and leafy and very hard to see one another. We could very easily pick out these whites of the eyes, allow your eyes to stand out. So it helped and aided in being able to communicate across space. And that's the reason why we have the whites, and not all animals have whites in their eyes. So this allows the eyes to stand out and be more of a communication feature. We also have species-specific things like this gorilla chest beating. I'll try to show it to you, and hopefully you can hear this. But this was a pack of gorillas that were in the forest, and they were being threatened, I suppose, by the cameraman. They did not like the cameraman's presence to be there. Just a moment while I get this for you. But I hope you can hear this. I'm going to skip a little. So the gorillas clearly know that something is going to happen. They're all sort of getting out of the way for this male here, who's going to rush the cameraman, and hopefully you can hear the chest beating. Wow, that's just an incredible sound. Here it is again. I hope you could hear that. But anyway, it's a very interesting sound that they make. And anyone, I think, it doesn't matter what species you are, if a gorilla rushes you and makes that sound, I think you're going to be pretty scared, and you know what to do. So vocalizations are a really important channel of communication. Again, we're dealing with animals that live in the forest, including our ancestors, arboreal. So sound is a good way to communicate when you can't see one another. And so each species has its own vocal repertoire. They have their own sounds. And they are born with the tendency to have their species-specific sounds. So a howler monkey like this one is going to be born making howler monkey sounds. Even without any influence of having a model, a howler monkey would still be born being able to make sort of these kinds of sounds. They wouldn't be perfect or that great for communicating, but they could make only howler monkey type sounds. They have certain vocal apparatus that is controlled by their genes. So there's a cool website I just wanted to show you, which you could go on if you're interested and listen to some of these different, these are all a whole collection of sounds of different kinds of primates. And I wanted to play a couple of these for you. Let me see. I wanted to play gibbons for you, this one. So see if you can hear this. So Some nice gibbons calling to one another across the forest. And then there's a cool website for bonobos, and they've actually now looked at bonobos in context and listened to some of the sounds they make. So they know, people who study them know that what the high hoot sound means, but here's what it sounds like. And here are some food calls. It's like yummy, share with me. And then here's an alarm call. And here is some threat barks. And male hoots. And here's some, this is a cool one, laughter. Bonobos laughing. And then here is a nice, really scary sounding howler monkey. Wow, so that is a really scary sound that if you were in the forest, you would think it was a lion or something. But that's a good example also of sexual dimorphism and runaway selection. The males have this really big booming cavity for making the sounds. The females choose the males based on sound, and then we get this big difference in males and females. So that's kind of cool also. You can also look at individual voices for each individual in a group, just like we have signature sounding voices. This study looked at some known baboons that they recorded their voices and they could record their signature sounds. And this is that's a sonogram of the different voices sounds, and they each have their own sort of vocal signature. So Champagne has a this different kind of a voice than Helen, and they can tell each other apart based on just the way their voices sound, just like we can. Okay, now agonistic displays are threatening displays. Trying to intimidate someone, tell them to stay away, stay back. This is my area, these are my resources. So threatening gestures, stares, and poses. We often think about animals fighting a lot, but they actually don't want to fight. So they actually use these agonistic displays to prevent physical fighting. In fact, physical violent encounters are more rare where there's really actually an injury. And it's adaptive to be able to make these agonistic calls and to understand what the agonistic calls means to avoid fighting, to be able to survive and pass on your genes. So this is an interesting behavior by male baboons. They actually flash these white eyelids when they're getting pissed off. So if they want to intimidate another one, they're going to give them this flash of the eyelids, and then they start increasing their behavioral displays up until the point when they start showing off these huge canine teeth, which we think are mostly for display to other males and maybe to females, but they eventually get into a very, very aggressive display and may eventually attack if the receiver is not getting that cue. Now, what about this one? Some animals, and this monkey in particular, after making some sounds, they actually show their genitals from behind as a threat. So this guy is basically showing his genitals and saying to the other males, like, I'm a big, strong guy. I've got these characteristics. You don't want to mess with me. It's kind of a funny way of behaving, but this is an easy assessment for them males to make. Olfactory communication is also used. So all primates use body odor to communicate, and many of them scent mark. We don't think about that as much being humans, but just like your dog scent marks, this is a way of claiming territory and warning off intruders. So you can also have information contained within the scent marking about the health and quality, age, reproductive status, etc. of other animals who are using these different kinds of communication. So these male ring-tailed lemurs in this video will be marking their territories with chemicals produced by anogenital glands. So animals have lots of different glands that we don't have, but they're little sacs under their skin that contain a smelly substance that can be emitted that has information in it. And so watch what these lemurs are doing here. We have presumably a male lemur here. He's going to mark with his anogenital gland way up high on a tree. He's getting his butt basically up high on that tree and leaving a mark there. Now we have another individual come along, getting some information, reading the signals, reading the communication, what's in there, the health quality, reproductive status of that other individual. And now look what this one's going to do. He's going to actually mark over that mark with his wrist glands. So he's going to, you see how he pulls? He's pulling and releasing a substance from the glands in his wrist, and he's actually marking higher. He's marking over and marking higher than the other lemur was marking to say, actually, this is my tree and I'm better than you are. So it's a personalized signature. Just like with the sounds, they can hear each other's voices. They can also recognize each other's scent and get some information out of it that way. Lots of animals use scented urine to mark their territories. The little tiny New World monkeys, these tamarins and marmosets, we've seen them before in videos farming tree sap. They will actually mark their territories so that they know and make little scent marked fences around the best tree farm locations. Now humans, we still actually do use olfactory communication, although we scrub up our body odors and often cover our body odors with perfume. The funny thing, I think, is that a lot of perfumes that we pay money for and buy actually contain animal musk, or many of the same substances that animal musk and pheromones are made out of are added into our perfumes, and they're supposed to be aphrodisiacs and sexual attractants. So it's just very funny that we scrub up and then we put this stuff on. So pheromones are chemicals that give off powerful subliminal, doesn't have to be an odor, but it's a chemical message that has an effect on the physiology and behavior of others, and it's oftentimes without any awareness. So pheromones can be emitted that help in sexual attraction, that aid in sexual attraction. We might not even know why we're sexually attracted to someone, but it's because we get information from their pheromones. The other thing that pheromones can do is aid in ovulation regulation. So females that are living together, like in a dorm or together somewhere, can often regulate their ovulation, and this is a function of pheromones. So one female would give off a pheromone when she's ovulating, and the others would then regulate to that pheromone. And I'm going to stop there, and I'll pick it up on the next video.